So today, we're diving into something really fascinating. We're looking at a critical analysis of the Catholic Church's arguments on natural law, but we're doing it from a very specific angle: pure logic. This isn't about faith or theology. This is about taking an argument apart piece by piece to see how it's built. The source we're looking at throws this wild image at us right from the start. Imagine the church as a philosophy student. This one single idea, this one metaphor, is really the key to the entire analysis we're about to walk through. It sets the whole stage. Okay, so let's actually run with this, right? Let's imagine the church's whole argument on natural law is basically a big term paper for a philosophy class. We're going to look at its main thesis, the evidence it uses, and see if it holds up, according to the rules of Logic 101. All right, so the very first thing this analysis points out in the paper is what it calls a closed loop. And this is right at the core of the whole thing. It's a type of circular reasoning that, according to the critique, creates this perfect, self-contained system that you just can't break into. So how does this loop actually work? It's pretty clever, actually. Step 1. The church says natural law can be understood by anyone just by using your reason. Sounds good, right? Step 2. But there's a catch. Your reason, and mine, well, it's wounded by sin, so it's not reliable. Step 3. Therefore, you need an infallible authority, that is, the church, to tell you what your supposedly unreliable reason should have concluded in the first place. You see the circle? It's pretty neat. And here's why that is so powerful. The analysis basically calls it a logical checkmate. Think about it. If you disagree with the final conclusion, they don't have to argue the point with you. They can just say, well, your disagreement is just proof that your reason is wounded, like we said. How do you even argue against that? Your objection just becomes more evidence that they're right. Okay, so that's the main thesis of the paper. But what about the supporting arguments? Do they pass the, sniff test? This is where the analysis starts looking for common logical fallacies.
All right, first up, special pleading. This is a classic one. It's basically when you say, the rules apply to everyone except me. You create a special exception for your own case, but you don't really give a good logical reason why.
And the source gives a really powerful example to show this in action. It compares natural family planning, which the church allows, with using a condom, which it doesn't. In both cases, look at the intent: to avoid having a baby, and the outcome: avoiding a baby. The analysis argues that if the intent and outcome are identical, then to say one is good and natural and the other is bad and unnatural, well, that's creating a special exception. That's special pleading. And this quote from the analysis just nails it. From a strictly philosophical point of view, if what you meant to do and what actually happened are the same in two different scenarios, then the acts have the same moral weight. To argue otherwise, you need a really good reason, and the source claims one isn't given.
Okay, fallacy number 2. This one is called the appeal to nature, and it's kind of the foundation for the last point. You've probably heard this kind of argument before. It's the simple idea that if something is natural, it must be good, and if it's unnatural, well, it must be bad.
But here's where the analysis says things get a little inconsistent. I mean, we thwart nature all the time, and we think it's a great thing. Eyeglasses thwart our naturally bad eyesight. Medicine thwarts a naturally occurring infection. Lightning rods thwart a natural bolt from the sky. So the question becomes, why is thwarting a natural biological process in one instance a grave evil, while in these other cases, it's seen as a moral good? And that brings us to our third fallacy, and it's a big one you've definitely heard of: the slippery slope. This is the classic argument that says, oh, if we allow this one little thing, it's going to open the floodgates, and then all these other horrible things will happen, and we won't be able to stop it. Now, the source pulls a really stark example of this right from the heart of the internal debates on this topic. The argument was literally made that if you let a married couple use a condom, you lose all logical ground to forbid any other kind of non-procreative sex act. It's presented as this all-or-nothing domino effect. So what's the counter to this? Well, the analysis brings up this idea it calls logical insulation. Basically, it's saying, hey, hold on a minute. A good thinker, a good philosopher, can draw lines in the sand. You can make a moral case for one thing in one specific context without logically committing yourself to everything else. The whole house doesn't have to fall down. Okay, now this is where things get really interesting, because the analysis doesn't just critique from the outside. It actually points to a concept inside Catholic theology itself that could act as a kind of internal counter-argument to all of this. It's a concept called sensus fidelium, which basically translates to the sense of the faithful. The idea here is that divine guidance doesn't just rest with the leadership, it's present in the entire community of believers, and that their collective conscience, as a whole, can't really be wrong on core matters of faith and morality. So, what does that look like in the real world? Well, check out this number. The source points out that something like 90%, maybe even more, of Catholics don't actually follow the Church's teaching on this. And from a sensus fidelium perspective, you could argue that's not just mass disobedience, it's the doctrine in action. It's the sense of the faithful speaking. The way the source frames it, this doctrine acts like a kind of theological safety valve. It creates a situation where if the leadership puts forward a teaching and the people on the ground almost unanimously say, you know what, this just doesn't feel right, it doesn't align with our lived experience, then that could be a signal that maybe, just maybe, the teaching itself is the problem. So, after all that, after looking at the main argument, the fallacies, and even the internal counter-arguments, we come back to where we started, our philosophy student and their term paper. It's time to see the final grade. So, how did our student do? What does the professor's report card actually say? Well, according to this analysis, it's a really mixed report card. For logic, an A. The source says the argument is perfectly consistent with its own premises. It's an airtight loop. But then in biology, an F, for basically using an understanding of science that it calls pre-microscope. An FX, a D, for putting the mechanics of biological plumbing above the personal justice of a situation. And finally, an honesty, an I, for incomplete, for not fully owning up to all the historical and cultural influences on its position. And when you look at that report card, the source says it all comes down to this one central tension. The tension between being right, as in maintaining your authority and being perfectly consistent with your own past statements, versus being correct, as in being factually and scientifically truthful. The critique argues that the priority has clearly been on being right. And that leaves us with the final, really provocative question that the source poses. Is this whole complex, internally consistent logical structure truly a search for truth, or is it a system that has evolved for the preservation of a brand? It's a heavy question, and one worth thinking about.